the left is in a pretty, I don't know, tumultuous time. And Michael provided a lot of clarity. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but certainly for me in terms of how to think about both domestic and foreign policy, right? How the left should position itself in incredibly controversial issues. And he was also very much willing to say things that might lead to some backlash, but needed to be said. Like, one thing that comes to mind is his willingness to kind of debunk some of the talking points coming from, like, let's say a Tulsi Gabbard, right? Who presented herself as like some leftist or some socialist, when in reality, she was anything but. So talk about what you're doing with the Michael Brooks Legacy Project and what you hope to accomplish through that work.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a few different jumping off points there. And I feel like at the heart of Michael's work was his ability to both like hold many contradictions and nuance and kind of opposing ideas at times, but then also to simplify. And it was really just in Michael, the individual, he was able to kind of create that synthesis. And I think in his passing, it's hit people how much of that he was holding and how much, you know, it keeps coming up again and again. Kind of, he was someone who seemed to be able to kind of hold under one big tent a lot of people on the left. And we felt that a bit of a breakdown post his passing. But a beautiful thing that has happened is a lot of people have found out about his work, and he's, you know, his work continues to go viral. It continues to impact people's education, understanding of situations as they, you know, develop even post his passing. I was speaking with a man yesterday who discovered Michael after Dr. Cornel West had tweeted about his passing. And he spent the last year just watching all of Michael's content. And he was telling me a story the other day, you know, and this is not uncommon. This is something I'm coming across a lot. So quite simply with the legacy work, what we're trying to do is just put Michael's work back out there. We're re-airing the episode every week. We started with the premiere of TMBS, which a lot of people missed. You know, you guys probably missed. You know, Ben probably missed. A lot of people like started, you know, listening later in. So that's been a fun thing to do. I've been interviewing people kind of behind a paywall on Patreon, just because it's a kind of personal project, and you know, it's nice to have it be like a little bit more of like a private community at this point. But that project is awesome. Thanks, Kale. No relation, but kismet spirit. That project, and I hope you guys will all come on. I've been kind of moving chronologically. So we've started with people that knew Michael as a kid and worked his way through his, you know, adolescence and teen years, and we're kind of now in college, post-college. But that is actually kind of my homework for a documentary we're making about Michael's work and life. And then the last thing I want to say, kind of just, you know, both talking about the very literal nature of the legacy work, but then also kind of like what the bigger kind of project and mission is. Because again, Michael was really good at self-promoting. He had a big ego. He had a lot of like, you know, he wanted to be this like big star, but the other part of him was like very focused on like not creating a cult of personality, not becoming obsessed with individual, you know, like he, again, it's like these multiple things he would hold. And David Griscom is working to, we're putting together a book project. And one of the videos we recently revisited was something where Michael talked about the difference between pity and solidarity. And that was originally taught to us as a Buddhist principle between like pity and compassion. And I've just been coming back to that a lot when I think about kind of when people say like, I don't know, what's a guiding principle or how to distill Michael's work. And I think that there are a lot of people who actually really do want to stand with their fellow humans, and they really do want the world to be a better place. And I think there's like a lot of judgment and division on the left and between liberals. And I've just been having a lot of conversations with people who like oftentimes just don't know, and they're not necessarily, and of course there are people who do know and are bad actors, but a lot of people just are like looking for that. And I think one way to kind of engage with people and like a way in is like, okay, is your set of politics something where it's like, this is pity, I feel bad for these people, America needs to do something, or is it solidarity, how do we stand with them? what actions can we take to truly be aligned? So, you know, solidarity to the people of Haiti, solidarity to the people of Cuba. Yeah, I know I'm throwing a lot out there, but it's still kind of developing and growing, and there's a lot of different elements to legacy work, and there's a lot of different elements to Michael's work, so it's hard to kind of streamline.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say that whenever I do a decode segment for here on whatever topic, literally the first thing I do every time is go into YouTube and just type in Michael Brooks plus topic name. And that's how I just start, you know, like that's how I start my research process for it. And it's just so remarkable, like the breadth of stuff that he was able to do in such a short period of time. But I wanted to ask about this, the project that you're doing for patrons, about, you know, like you said, mentioned the more personal one about like his life and, you know, his early years and things like that. What would be like a, you know, just like a little snippet that you could give people that maybe aren't yet patrons, but could be, about like that would surprise, like say they're fans of Michael's, but like they would be surprised about something that you uncovered, or that you covered, or that you talked about in this project?
I guess one thing that comes to mind is when Michael was little, he would call into this local talk show. And I actually posted the clip of this tape I found on YouTube. So probably a good amount of people did see this excerpt. Michael identifies himself as Stephen. He's a homeschooler. He predicts Bill Clinton winning in the 1992 primary in New York at a time where like no one thought Clinton was going to win. Michael also calls Clinton an idiot and says that he's supporting.
Hello, you're on WNNZ.
Hello, this is Stephen from Ashfield, and I think Clinton's going to win New York by a squeak.
You know, I happen to agree with your analysis there. I think that Clinton has pulled some rabbits out of the hat in recent days. His appearance on the Phil Donahue show the other day was a brilliant performance, where Donahue kept trying to ask him about, you know, whether he inhaled his marijuana and had an affair. And finally, the audience booed Donahue and said, look, we want to hear about education and Medicaid and how you're going to fix the economy. We don't want to hear about this junk anymore. But what do you base your analysis on, sir?
Well, I was hoping that I'm hoping that Brown wins it. I just think that it's kind of like Clinton's an idiot. And most of the people in New York, you know, are kind of funked up. But so if he's going to go in New York, you know, he's going to get voted for.
You know, you've really been following this race. What's your first name?
Stephen.
Stephen, and are you in school, Stephen?
No, I'm homeschooled.
You're homeschooled. How old are you?
Oh, I'm great. It's going great.
How old are you?
I'm 8 years old.
You're 8 years old, you're homeschooled, and you can discuss the presidential race more intelligently than more adults. Well, I'd say that's a good argument for homeschooling.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad to hear from you, Stephen, and you keep it up, and give me a call next week, and we'll see how good your prediction came.
Okay, bye.
Okay, thanks for your call.
Bye.
5-6.
So then later I'm talking to Matt Binder, several weeks later, and he goes, did you know that Al Giordano, who was the talk show host, and it's a little complicated, of like the—
Wait, that's Al Giordano? Like the Al Giordano?
Yes.
The same guy?
Yes. So I had no clue. And I guess that they were like Twitter enemies, and Al was very anti-Bernie and like a huge Hillary shill. And I knew none of this. And I have to go back and rewatch the interview with Al, which was a really nice interview. And, you know, he was anti-nukes. He's kind of this like, you know, hippie guy from where I grew up. I just assumed he was a Bernie guy. And I bet I mentioned Bernie a bunch. And I think I have to go back and watch it, but I think he's kind of weird when I'm kind of just like, well, after, you know, our loss, he's kind of like, but
no,
my God.
He like stuck the knife in. Yeah.
Yeah,
especially in 2016. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a funny, like, I don't know. That was like a surprise. That's not very personal to Michael, but I guess that's something fresh in my memory of just like a funny connecting the dots. I don't even know if Michael knew that Al was the person he called into as a kid, because it was just kind of like family lore. I doubt he maybe he knew.
Probably very really remembered. I mean, how old was he? 6?
Yeah, he was 7. I feel like my parents were like, oh, he used to call into, you know, WNNZ or whatever, like the radio station was. I don't really remember them saying the host's name. I doubt he was like so curious to know about himself. So and also Al had gone on Sam's show on Air America. So there's just like these weird things that are kind of coming up that, kind of makes, I guess when someone passes away, things like sort of just like make sense in some ways in terms of like their trajectory or like the story of their life. But when they're such a young person and they're just beginning to build, you're not thinking of it like at the time. So it's been kind of interesting to go and piece together these parts of Michael's development. One other quick thing I'll say is I feel like a theme that comes up a lot are people telling me that Michael told them he wanted to be president, which I think he stopped saying as much at the time TMBS became popular. And then also his complicated, I call it his first heartbreak, but his love and then dismay at the trajectory of Obama and his politics is another big theme.
Oh, that's fascinating. I mean,
yeah,
I heard a lot of the very justified critique toward Obama, but I didn't know that, I mean, I think a lot of people had high hopes for Obama, especially considering like what campaign Obama was like and how incredibly different he was from President Obama, So that's really surprising. Can you share a little bit of that with us? Like what were his thoughts on Obama early on?
I mean, there's like, it's a theme that comes up a lot because Michael was in college, he's a little older than me. And I don't know, maybe you guys are, I don't know, but who cares? But when he was in college, it was a pretty bleak, it was like Carrie will maybe like the person on, the left, or we didn't really, I didn't say left, it was like, liberal or Democrat. And a lot of his peers are kind of just like reminding me of like, this was a really different time. Like Bush was terrifying and people didn't care as much. Like, the whole like boogeyman of Trump compared to like, people hated Bush, don't get me wrong, but like just the activation around it wasn't maybe as high. And they were like, Obama, and obviously some of Michael's heroes were very critical of Obama at that time. So it's not like that wasn't part of the equation, but for like your average student, there was this really exciting candidate and, he had such charisma and such passion and spoke so beautifully about this future. And I think a lot of people, I mean, my high school, like we had the afternoon off, we watched the inauguration, people were like partying in the halls. I mean, it was like a really joyous event. And so I think it's been, and this does not diminish, I'm not trying to like in any way downplay the horrific things that happened during that presidency. I'm just saying it's kind of like a good reminder to go back and like kind of just be honest about like where we were and how people felt. And I think kind of talking to folks about Michael's political evolution is interesting because he always was extremely left. I mean, obviously we have him as a kid criticizing Bill Clinton and like, there is this, him as a 12-year-old or 13-year-old walking around with Fidel Castro book under his arm. Like he really always had that, but debating people about Israel at Shabbat dinners. But anyways, I digress. But, at the same time, the culture was like, it was cool to kind of be like moderate and liberal in a way that now it's cool to be, more radical and left. And I think it's kind of healthy mentally to kind of just acknowledge this and like talk about this. Cause I feel like now things have gotten so intense with everyone policing each other about like who's legit and who's not. And, it doesn't give us
you
time
mentioned
to
that, Lisha, because I last night I watched the new pilot for the HBO show White Lotus, and there's like a scene where these like two hot Zoomer girls are they're at a resort. The show takes place in a resort in Hawaii, like a high-end resort, and there's like these two like really hot Zoomer girls, and they're at their dinner table like kind of chatting amongst themselves like before like the dinner conversation starts, like everyone's kind of sitting down, and like one of the girls is like, she was a neo-lib and a neocon, like they're clearly talking about Hillary, and the mom's like, what'd you say? Are you talking about Hillary? Hillary Clinton? Like it's like, oh, it's cool now to, I guess, amongst the young people to like bash Hillary Clinton. Well, to women my age, like she's a hero, blah 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 blah. But it's like, I love that idea that like the cool Zoomers now, like these like hot girls in bikinis, like she was the neo-lib and a neocon.
It's amazing.
I'm surprised to hear that because I've actually, the show's been recommended to me. I want to check it out. But like even from where I sit, I feel like getting that like approved in Hollywood feels like a feat. Like I feel like I literally burned bridges and lost contacts over like being critical of Warren, not to mention Hillary, and people like can't hear I preferred Bernie over Hillary, not I wanted Trump to win over Hillary. Like, I don't quite understand why that's like a mental breakdown for people, but it seems to continue to be.
Yeah. No,
you know, I haven't watched that show, but just based on your description of it, Nando, it speaks to what you mentioned, Lisha, like the policing, right? Like who's a better leftist or who's further to the left and who's more moral, or like, I feel like a lot of the discourse among the left has kind of devolved into discussions about, like, I don't know, posturing and morality, as opposed to like a material analysis that I think Michael did a really good job in. Like his material analysis was always involved in like any story he was covering, especially like, you know, foreign policy. Like, a lot of the discussion right now is like, imperialism, good or bad? And it's like, no, we're having a moral discussion, and sure, we can have that discussion, but like, can we talk about like the actual material drivers and like the real motivators and factors behind the scenes that drive U.S. imperialism? And I think he did a really good job in covering that, but also in covering it in a nuanced way. Like, you mentioned the contradictions, and like he would always talk about the dialectic, right? And I wish I had fully understood that when he was alive. Like, he would use the word dialectic and I didn't know what it meant, but I saw him practicing it. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's,
you knew it when you saw it. It's like porn, you know, like, you know, it when you see it.
That's what I've always thought about
exactly like that.
It's the dialectic is like porn.
It's interesting you say that, and I think too, like, a really dangerous thing with kind of this, like, oh, to be this way, it's cool now. Part of that is kind of exciting, and like I'm excited by it, but it's also, people can just sense the BS, and so when you're trying to like build like this kind of global political project of solidarity, if your like political project is based on like having the right meme or like the most left set of like hot takes, and it's going to be alienating to other people. And I think that was essentially something that, you know, I truly get emails and messages about it all the time. Like, the way Michael was kind of like synthesizing, putting stuff out there, it pulled people into the tent. It didn't push them away. And I think that that's definitely something that worries me, that I kind of see as a pattern. I had a smarter point to make there. Oh, I know what it was. So we're doing a Brooks Books Club as part of the legacy work, just kind of revisiting some books that Michael enjoyed. And today we were talking to Haman Najdid, who wrote The Ministry of Guidance Invites You Not to Stay. And he lived in Iran for a year in 2012 during Ahmadinejad was in power. And he just kind of wrote about living there and like what that experience was. Like, obviously it's like, you know, a liberal point of view, but it's not like a super political book. It's just kind of like almost like an Anthony Bourdain episode of like, you know, his experience there. And there was just something so Michael really responded to that book. And I think, you know, this is like a piece of literature that just kind of like makes Iran like a real place where like people sometimes get in trouble with the morality police and sometimes don't, and people, drinking's illegal, but they still get booze, and there's disagreements about this, and it just humanizes. And I think that again was just like such a thing that Michael was doing, which was kind of like humanizing. One more thing, just because I everything's kind of percolating right now, but I just got an email from a fan who lives in Gaza, and he said Michael inspired him to look outside of Israel and Palestine, and he was learning all about Brazil and Venezuela and that struggle. And I just think that by kind of bringing just so many different struggles and just kind of putting them in just like a very grounded, real framing, it was inspiring people to just feel solidarity in such a like beautiful, interconnected network. And I really hope that your guys' work Bros, you know, Danny Bessner's new show, Ben Burgess, all of Michael's kind of larger web of people, you guys are able to continue to put out that kind of content. And because I'm seeing in real time the amount of people that Michael, one individual, was able to influence in a positive way is like, he didn't know, I didn't know. It's really, I don't really quite have words for it.
I'm just not as good as him.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna offline. I was gonna talk to you about that.
Tell me about it. Just remind me. Yeah, you'll never be as good as him.
No, I mean, you don't want to like deify and make it like Saint Michael,
No.
but I think you know, it just, he for whatever reason had multiple burners on at once, and I think, you know, it's inspiring to do that.
His ability to like very clearly disagree with someone without it leading to a major conflict was, I mean, masterful. I'm too fiery. Like I agree with you, Nando. Not about you, but mostly about me. Like there's a certain temperament that he brought to the table that I lack personally. But I am who I am. I can't change it. I'll try to kind of keep it under control for this show, but mostly because I don't want to be reprimanded. But yeah, I think that he had this incredible ability of bringing people together and engaging in conversations where a disagreement might be front and center, but he didn't, you know, divide people based on those disagreements. He tried to find ways to persuade, to bring people into, you know, this broader coalition. And I really respected that. That was something that I was trying to learn from as much as possible. What would you say? I know that you had a lot of political discussions with him that oftentimes would get fiery. I mean, you've opened up a little bit about that in the past. What would you say, you know, you learned from Michael, you know, politically? Like, what's one thing that like he persuaded you on, maybe?
You know, it's a little, I'm trying to think of like one concrete example. I think Michael had just like bigger, wider thinking. And I think I was like quicker to respond to like, you know, if there was like one case of injustice or one person was upset about this, I think that I kind of have that tendency. So I think a lot of what we like kind of would debate about would be like the merits of certain like maybe social movements. Like he would be kind of a few steps ahead of me and seeing how they would be co-opted to basically make us all feel other from each other. And I, you know, it's kind of hard to articulate because some of these things I don't want to like name a certain one because it's hard. Yeah, for some reason, not one example is coming to mind of something like, oh, Michael really changed my mind on that. But I just think that without Michael, I don't know until this year when like just like TikTok popped off and there's just been kind of like this whole like wider education around like I grew up with a sibling who was just so anti-imperialist, so aware of like so many parts of the world. So this isn't really something he changed my mind about, but I just always grew up having just this person in my life who was just so focused on the international and just seemed to have like this very strong grasp on how people's lives were in different regions, in different states, in different countries. And just kind of that was always part of the conversation. So that's kind of sort of broadly what comes to mind. Like, I don't know if I would have like had like, you know, I just always knew like what was up in Cuba. Like, I just always knew like what was going on in Haiti. I knew how the Clintons were involved in what was going on, you know, like from a young age. And I don't know if I would have, you know, I had some really cool lefty radical teachers. I had a like English teacher who had a crush on Hugo Chavez. Like I had some unusual people who are part of my education track that's like not the norm, but just day to day to have Michael in my house. I don't know that, and is that funny? The anecdote about the teacher was definitely a big influence.
People remember Hugo Chavez in the latter years, but you know, I think a huge part of his appeal in Venezuela in the early years, when he attempted a coup d'état in the early '90s, as a trim, buff, you know, like military, you know, I think he was like a sergeant or colonel. I don't know what rank he was, but like, you know, he had his appeal. I don't.
Nando was the English teacher. Sorry to out you.
Yeah, that was me. Sorry. I was.
Well, yeah, I hope that was concise. I kind of just jotted down a bunch of stuff and I didn't really get it super in order, but I feel like that hopefully gave y'all a good taste of kind of what we're trying to work on.
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Everyone, please go check out the Michael Brooks Legacy Project Patreon page. Become a patron and support this work because it's important. I mean, and I agree with you, Nando. There have been so many stories that, you know, broke following his passing where I want clarity on the issue, and I'll look it up, and he's just covered so many topics. Like the variety of topics that he delved into was pretty impressive. So thank you for keeping that work alive, Lisha. It means a lot to me personally, means a lot to us. But more importantly, it means a lot to individuals who are, you know, trying to learn more about politics and, more importantly, the left. They're not going to get that education in like traditional schools in the US. And I think what Michael did was such an important service. So thank you for keeping that alive.